So the Signal Chat story, don't get attached to it. It'll be gone in like a week or so. It'll be forgotten about because so far, the complaints out there, while, look, we should always take some of these accusations seriously and look into them. I can't imagine what the worst case scenario is here. So some goober that wasn't supposed to be on a group chat got roped into a group chat with some high-ranking guys in the White House who were talking about an attack that was going to come out. And so I am interested in the criticism of this. Yeah, sure, someone boo-booed, and that's embarrassing, and we should be a little more careful about that. And, that if there were some national secrets that were in there, was it something that would, hurt the country as a whole, or anyone, like I'm someone undercover or something like that. But unless there's something explicit like that, I don't even know who the victim is here. Who is bearing the negative consequences of this boo-boo? Like when they say someone needs to be held accountable, what does that mean? Held accountable for what? Because if you and I were playing baseball in my front yard and you threw this pitch and I just cranked a home run really hard and it went through my neighbor's window, holding someone accountable would be assigning blame to that person and then making them compensate the homeowner for replacing the window. That's what accountability is, right? Not only do you admit fault, then you either pay back the person who you damaged or, somehow make whole the wrong that happened. So here, what's the wrong that happened that needs to be accounted for? How do we make it right? If there was, a Jason Bourne out there, some secret agent, and we accidentally let it slip that they were undercover, well, what do? How do we make that right? We have to give them like a pension that would replace the income we just blew out of the water because their career's over? I mean, what would that look like? So out of the Signal Chat, who's the victim? Who was aggrieved by this? What was lost? What was the negative consequence from this? And what does accountability look like? Because I don't have anybody coming up with that. I don't have anybody saying, well, this is how it harmed our national interest, or this is how it harmed a certain person or an agency or the taxpayer or some private property or public property. I don't even think anyone littered around here. So I read this story and I look at all the attention that's coming from the media and I'm reminded, I get it. I forget, sometimes you do too, that we think news organizations are out there just putting out the news, the most important thing that's happening that day that affects you and your family the most. But for many platforms, it's been your experience, your observation, that they choose headlines where they go through all the stories of the day and they say, what hurts Trump the most? What hurts my political opposition the most? Or what makes my political allies look the best? And so this is it. That's what this is. Out of all the stories that are going on, out of all the facets of what's going on with foreign policy and the economy and domestic policy and immigration, price of eggs, this is the one that makes them look the worst. What do you think they're going to put at the headline? The Jasmine Crockett comment? Does that make them look good? Does that win them support? What are they going to put in the headlines? That the price of gas has dropped 70 cents since since Christmas? Are they going to put that in? What about the price of eggs? Gone down like $2 on average per dozen. Almost back to where they were before the whole egg catastrophe began. Are they going to report on the border? Where it's locked down and deportations are happening, but it turns out that the American people don't hate deportations like they were told to. And so they can't really report on that because that'll only engender more support for Team Red. That's why we're hearing about this Signal Chat. Not that it's anything big or important or has any negative effect on you or your family or the country or the taxpayer. Remember, I want you to remember this. You're like, well, could they really make that much headlines, that much attention out of a nothing burger? Are you kidding me? What was the first impeachment against Donald Trump? Do you even remember what it was for? I don't know. It had something to do with Ukraine. Yeah. He made a phone call to Ukraine. And that was it. And what was the negative consequences of that phone call? What happened in that phone call? You don't even know. You don't even remember. Well, how did we make someone accountable? Well, who was harmed because of that phone call? Or was there taxpayer money wasted? Or was there national secrets divulged? Or what was the negative consequence of that phone call? Nothing. That was a nothing burger too. And they got that all the way into an impeachment trial in the Senate. Didn't work, but yeah, don't worry. In a week, we won't even be talking about this Signal thing. Because, yeah, someone made a mistake, and if you're asking for accountability, what, you want someone to be fired? Is that would that make it better? Someone to be fired for what? I still don't know the negative consequences of what happened on the Signal chat. Well, this is a scary, important breach of national security. How? It's no different than if they had been talking about it at a cigar bar. I forgot what it was called, but when I went to D.C., I went to a cigar bar. I was invited, and there were just a bunch of congressmen talking to each other, and it's weird to see all these people that you know from TV and the news and whatnot, and they're all just having conversations, and you could just walk up next to them and hear what they're talking about. And it was no different than this Goldberg guy just being in a cigar bar, walking up and eavesdropping on Pete Hegseth, talking to J.D. Vance, talking to, who's the other guy, Tim Walz or something. Are you really worried about this Signal chat? Explain to me why you are. 800-288-9227. 800-288-9227. Because I can't find that anybody did anything wrong. I can't find that any national secrets were divulged or there was a threat of some sort of negative consequences happening to anyone, anywhere. Can someone explain to me why I'm supposed to be scared about this Signal chat story? 800-288-9227. 800-288-9227. Coming up next, we'll talk about a cybersecurity expert, Ted Klauser, about the Signal chat situation. I'm James Parker. It's News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. So the Signal chat story is getting a lot of headlines. Are there some lessons to be learned from it? Let's ask my next guest, Ted Klauser, PCA Tech Solutions. Welcome back to the James Show. And as a tech consultant, Signal has probably been on your radar before, and you probably have at least a cursory knowledge of it. Do you find it unusual that they were using Signal in the first place, Ted?
Well, thanks for having me back on, James. Signal is a well-known secure messaging app. It's really the gold standard. I use it for some of my secure messaging, and so originally, what's really interesting about all this is we're seeing sort of an investigation unfold right in the public eye from things that we deal with on a regular basis. So as I've watched this, at first I thought, it seems odd that this is being used. But then after some of the testifying today, we learned that Signal, as best we can tell, is actually pre-installed on the government devices. So then it prompted me to look, is that accurate? And so CISA, which is a cybersecurity and infrastructure security agency, actually published an article in December of 24 saying that it is a recommended app that they're suggesting to use even on government issued devices.
So I don't think anyone could accidentally get in this group chat. Don't you have to be sent an invitation? And in order to be sent an invitation, you have to be a contact already in someone's phone. Like, what are the steps to get someone into this chat?
Yeah, so they had to be added. And I've watched this really unfold. And with Jeffrey posting the entire chat today, I had the opportunity to read through it all. And what you can really do is see some of the outliers. So as we look at cybersecurity situations, and usually what we try to do is say, first, is it an incident? Let's treat it as an incident. Let's not necessarily assume it's a breach until we can confirm it, because we want to keep people calm. And in this case, we would look at it as an incident. So when I looked at all of the thread, first I noticed that there were 19 members that were in the thread. Mike Waltz clearly is the only admin based on that screenshot. He has since owned adding him, although he doesn't seem to know how he added him. But that is the only way Jeffrey was brought into that chat. And then if you start looking at some of the other things, and I actually would love to see someone else's screenshot, how did Jeffrey's name show on their end? Because on his screenshot, it just says you. And so I would love to know, how did his name show up?
Like if it was just his initials, he could have been mistaken for someone else.
It's possible. As I went and looked at all the anomalies, you had Jacob on there, who, as best I could tell, looks like Jacob Sullivan. You had Brian, and I'm not sure who Brian is, but I noticed that Brian asked to add Brian McCormick for the NSC, but I don't see Brian McCormick. Does that mean that Brian is Brian McCormick? I would be curious. And the one thing that really caught my attention, and I noticed Marco just talked from Jamaica about it. But
is that MAR? Is MAR
in there twice?
Yeah, MAR. Is that Marco Rubio?
I would assume. Yeah, and so there's an interesting fact. So MAR is in there twice.
I see.
The first message, when he commented to say he requested Mike Needham, is actually pink. And if you look closer at the second one, it's brown. And so he either has two devices in there for some reason, so two different numbers, which I guess would be possible, But then I would ask, why Marco and not anybody else? And so those are the things that we need to really get to the bottom of as we start to evaluate. This was not a breach as best we can tell. This is a very secured platform. It's just somebody was let in the chat that shouldn't have been.
Is there any lessons we can learn from this, Ted?
Somebody should be monitoring and analyzing in a chat situation of this level. I guess first I would say if an internal chat form is available, something like a Microsoft Teams, it should be used. But in this case, if it was being used in Signal, somebody needs to monitor every single person that's on that chat and make sure that they are who they say they are and legitimate. So, I even heard Mike mention that maybe Jeffrey's number was in his cell phone as somebody else's name. That could be, but somebody needs to verify who is in that channel.
Yeah, sounds like solid advice. All right, Ted Clouser, I appreciate your expertise. Find him at pcatechsolutions.com. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, this is a great Ted Clouser. Coming up next, Snap for Snacks. Should we allow people on food stamps to buy junk food? Because there's a big push to end that, and then there's a big push that would be mean and cruel, and I thought you were for freedom and bodily autonomy, and who says Dr. Pepper's not nutritious? Food stamps for junk food next on The James Show. It's News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. What do you think about using food stamps for junk food? There's a bill that's floating around in Austin right now. God knows the House hadn't passed anything, but there's the Senate bill, 379, that says SNAP recipients, food stamps, SNAP, Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, SNAP benefits, would not be able to be used to buy certain energy drinks, sweetened beverages with added sugars or sweeteners, carbonated beverages, candy, potato chips, corn chips, or cookies. Now, a lot of people are coming out there and saying, well, this is dehumanizing, this isn't fair, this isn't good, this isn't right, this is mean, this isn't empathetic. So what? Do you think food stamps should be used? Do you think money should be taken from you and given to someone else and they can go buy a Snickers with it? 800-288-9227. 800-288-9227. Now, I am 100% firmly just against, not this bill, but food stamps, period, point blank, end of story. So I don't care what kind of hurdles you put on food stamps. Hey, if they want to get some food, if they have to jump on one foot and bark like a dog at the beginning of Coming to America, remember when he made her jump on one foot and bark like a dog? If you have to do that to get your food in order to use your food stamps, I really wouldn't care. Was that dehumanizing? Well, pay for your own food. 41 million people are on food stamps. You think we're overusing that a little bit? You think 15% of the country can't feed themselves? You think 15 million, 15% of the country, I bet you there's a big chunk of those that could actually feed themselves. And there are people who can't, people who are disabled or infirmed or 93 years old in the walker and, they didn't save enough money and they already ran out of assets. But I think what few people couldn't feed themselves, we could easily go back to covering through private charity, just like we did through all of human history up until, LBJ? So don't give me the argument about, we have, what about autonomy? What about freedom? No, you've already lost autonomy and freedom when you're forcing other people to cover your bill. You lost that. That's not what freedom is. Freedom would be like if I didn't have to pay for it. Freedom would be like if you didn't have to pay for it. Freedom would be if you paid for it, your damn self. Or, here's another idea, private voluntary donations. From actual altruism from your neighbors instead of this fake governmental altruism, which is just robbery masquerading as charity. So do you think SNAP benefits, food stamps, should be used for junk food? Now, I'll even go for a compromise here because I realize not a lot of people take my absolute position where I don't think we should have food stamps or anything, especially at the federal level. I don't think we should have at the state level either. But if you want to make like a compromise here, how about this? How about they have the same rules as the WIC people? Women and infant children, you can only buy a handful of things. You can buy bread, you can buy milk, you can buy eggs. There's not like an open-ended list of things you can buy. There's a short little white list of just a handful of things that it'll cover. If you don't like it, pay for it yourself. I've always thought food stamps are sort of an insult in a free country. And For the people that come at you with the charge of, there's kids who are depending on this. There's children in poverty who depend on food stamps. Why don't you ask? Here's a novel idea. Why don't you ask their dad if he can feed his kids? Why don't you ask? I assume maybe mom's around. Because you found it shocking that under the COVID regime, when we're all in the pandemic, and you saw that survey where 27% of people who self-identified as Democrats were okay with the state taking your kids away from you if you didn't get them vaccinated. But they don't care that there's no call to take kids away from parents who would starve their kids. If you can't feed your kids, if your kids are going to starve without taxpayer dollars, maybe you should lose custody. Maybe you should put it up for adoption, or maybe the state can come take care of it. You're going to starve your kid. You're going to let your kid starve. 800-288-9227. But so many of these programs just seem to be the government trying to replace a dad. It's like, I can't put a roof over my kid's head. Well, ask his dad. Oh, my kid, they're having problems getting through school or affording a private school. Ask his dad. Well, we need public transportation so my kid can go to school and back, or go to soccer practice and back, or go to the store or whatever. Why don't you ask their dad? And as much, y'all can try all you want. The government is a poor replacement for a dad. Ruth in Corsicana, you're on WBAP. What do you think about food stamps for junk food?
I can't say that I agree with it, but I can't say that I disagree with it. I was a food stamp recipient when my children were growing up. Not that I bought them sugary drinks or candy or anything like that, but I guess I could say I did buy some things that were considered junk food. So I guess it would just depend on what their lunches. And sometimes they probably weren't the best snacks in the world. But I did try to buy good food for the kids.
So when you were on food stamps, how did you get off?
I worked to get off of food stamps. I saved my money and, tried to get better jobs, or, work my way up at a job that I did have.
Man, I wish everyone used it like you did, because if they did, I could easily say, you see what Ruth went through? We could cover the few years that she was needing help feeding her kids through private voluntary donations, through food banks, through churches, through charities, United Way, Salvation Army, soup kitchens, whatever, and just get rid of this whole program whatsoever. But a lot of people use this as a gravy train for life, Ruth, and I think I think they ruin it for the people who use it the right way, like you did.
I was on the WIC program, too, when my children were born, and that is an absolutely great program. They sent a lady out to my house to teach me to make nutritious meals for my children.
Good Lord. And, Ruth, you didn't know how to cook for your kids?
Well, I did know how to cook, but the foods that they were giving me, it was just, they just came in and gave me some help. Just, did you know that you could do this? Or just to try to make it go further. I
cringe when people do things that your parents are supposed to do through government. I'm glad it helped and worked out for you, but that's your mom's job to teach you how to cook nutritious meals for your kids. That's your dad's job, or maybe a grandma's job, or something to that effect.
They died when I was young, so it was just me. And I did know how to cook. So, like I said, I knew how to cook, but I just thought it was something that was real.
Great. Ruth, we all appreciate your story down in Corsicana. Thanks for calling in, okay?
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ruth. All right, if you want to be next, 800-288-9227. Snap for snacks. Should we allow junk food to be covered by food stamps? I'm James Parker. It's News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. Let's go to, start with Rebecca and Garland. What do you think about Snap for snacks?
No, they shouldn't be allowed to buy snacks. I was at Walmart the other day. They were buying candy and stuff to stuff in a piñata. Spent $168. That's not what we pay for.
Happy birthday to some kiddo. So my first real experience with this, we didn't have food stamps when I was growing up. Food stamps existed. We just weren't on them. I bagged groceries at an Albertsons for a few months when I was a senior in high school. So I got to see what everybody buys for groceries. And if you're almost OCD in your human observation like I am, it was endlessly entertaining, because you would see like the big healthy people come in and buy fruits and vegetables and solid chunks of meat. Like the muscle-bound guy. Those guys eat fantastic. They don't eat crap. And then you would see, God, just the worst of the stereotypes when people come in with 2 baskets full of food and it's all junk and it's all food stamps. And like that just makes you bang your head on the table. But you do see the reluctant single mom with her head down in shame, paying for healthy food with food stamps, and she's not going to be on them for long. And so, it's hard to, not throw the baby out with the bathwater, but, I'm glad you see it like a lot of other people see it. Like, of course, this isn't for luxury items. This is supposed to be so you barely get by. And once you get out of that realm, then we're not doing taxpayer-funded charity anymore. We're doing taxpayer-funded luxuries. And I think it's pretty easy to draw the line on that one, Rebecca. Thank you. Christy in Fort Worth, you're on WBAP. What do you think?
I think it's absolutely ridiculous. I grew up in the 60s. We had no food programs. We had no support from my father. It was my mother raising 2 girls, the best of 3 Hershey's candy bars. Sometimes they'd have almonds on it for a treat, and we'd 3 sit down and we'd have our candy bars. When she did remarry, and I came in from school, I'd be hungry. We actually had junk food in the house, but I would go to the cupboard and I would get out a can of green beans or corn or English peas, and I would eat those. Of course, she'd get home and she'd want to plan her dinner out. She'd holler my name because she was going to have that for dinner, and I ate it. But, what are you going to do? Yell at a kid for eating vegetables?
Well, I remember my grandfather telling me a story about when he was poor growing up way back right before World War II. He got a candy bar for Christmas and he made it last a month, because he would just nibble off like a little piece, and so he wasn't like destitute or whatever. He was just a normal, regular, middle class American, not even 100 years ago. And the luxurious lifestyle that some of these people are living on, who are supposed to be destitute, would not be looked highly upon by previous generations. One more here, Carolyn in Lampasas. What do you think about food stamps for junk food?
Well, I'm like the other ladies. It's absolutely ridiculous. I have a small business, and people in front of me at the grocery store, and they're buying all this crap that, just crap food, and I'm barely able to keep my doors open because, I'm buying real food to serve and sell to people. And then you get phone calls at a restaurant, and they're asking you if you would like to accept food stamps or WIC or whatever that other stuff is. And I told them, are you kidding me? No. When you don't have the money to buy your own groceries, you don't get to go out to eat. I mean, it's just the way it is.
Yeah, well, that doesn't buy a whole lot of votes, Carolyn. Apparently gouging us is more politically popular than handing out what they gouged to other people. Thank you very much for calling in, Lampasas, Carolyn. 800-288-9227. Thank you to everyone who came out to the James Show listener meetup last night. It was a good time. Thank you very much to Bob Lavelle for coming out. Some of the people that you hear on the James Show, a couple of regular callers came out. Lance Johnson, the guy who does the Seek Collaborative, the homeschool guy, was there. The big star that was there was Jim Verdi, who used to be with the Bongino Show, now with the Vince Show. He was there last night. And I think people wanted to talk to him just as much as they wanted to talk to me, and I got to talk to him for a long time. So super cool catching up with you. All the people I got to meet, the transplants from Massachusetts, Samantha that came down from Denton, there's Steve and Carrollton. It was a great time. You should come to the next one. Just stay tuned here. I'll tell you whenever it's going to happen. All right, my next guest is someone who is going to help us keep an eye on what's going on with food banks. And, food insecurity is kind of the popular term. But Connie Ritchie, welcome to WBAP. How concerned are the food banks out there about DOGE cuts? Could that hurt our food banks?
Yeah, thank you for having me. First of all, absolutely. So in the past 2 weeks, the USDA canceled and paused about $1 billion in 2 programs that really gave schools and food banks the money they need to buy food directly from local farms. So you always think about when you go to a food bank, it's always the canned goods, but they actually typically have fresh food, and the way they get that is they purchase them directly from farmers. So with the recent reduction, basically a program called the Local Food for Schools Cooperative Agreement supports those food banks and other feeding organizations, and it's been really difficult for them to adjust to the rapid pivot.
So is there anything that people listening out there need to do differently in order to address this?
So it's always really difficult when organizations are reliant on government funding, especially when we're seeing all of these reductions. What we always like to say is specifically if you are a supporter of Food Bank, they could really use your support. So for example, $1 can help offset some of that cost. So just simply giving $1 or if you have something extra in your pantry that you can give out to food banks specifically. We are, even though inflation is leveling off a little bit, a lot of families are still getting caught up in that and still trying to find their next meal specifically. But what's going to be really helpful and we're really watching is the impact on these cuts, specifically on the 250,000 children that really rely on this fresh food. And so what we don't know is even though food banks are buying those products from farmers, schools are too. So you're really looking at the nutrition that the kids are getting at school. And that's what Independence Gardens really focuses on, is to ensure that we get fresh food access to kids in schools.
Well, you're an interesting person to ask about the proposal in Austin where they want to cut off SNAP benefits for junk food. Do you have a strong opinion on that either way?
You know, to me, it's like there has to be a balance, right? And so people are saying we have to cut junk food out. Well, and that's kind of like asking a kid to give up pizza when that's their favorite thing. And it's one of the things where you have to have balance a little bit. And I think what we need to focus in on is how do we get more access to fresh food to kids? We're always going to the extreme of just cutting something out, but we're not looking at what's readily available to do is let's just support programming and policies that really connect farmers to schools or kids to get them fresh foods, or like Independence Gardens, we provide programming directly to schools where they're growing hydroponics in schools specifically. And so those programs, or in our upcoming Girls Save the World program, where we have middle and high school girls coming up with solutions to fresh food access. There are specific programs that we can put in versus just automatically cutting junk food, because it's like when you tell a kid you can't have something, they're going to eat it twice as much, right? And so what we're saying is you have to find the balance. And yes, there is some things out there that you may have to limit, but I think as an organization and at least a society, we just need to find balance on what we can give food and what is readily accessible for them to have in balance, per se.
Connie Ritchie, how do we find Independence Gardens in Louisville online?
So you go to independencegardens.org and you can find out all about what we do in schools and communities.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the update. You too. All right, we have the next big WBAP event is going to be WeatherCon. It's sponsored by a James Show sponsor as well, Blue Ribbon Roofing. Round of applause for Blue Ribbon Roofing for putting it on. Because they don't let us just go to the Frontiers of Flight Museum for free. There has to be some money exchanging hands. But this is the big time for WBAP Chief Meteorologist Brad Barton to shine. And it was him. Everyone who came last year wanted to see him or Hal J. The rest of us were just, second place finishers. Like we weren't even, I think I had to take out the trash when it was done. But come on out. Blue Ribbon Roofing's 2025 WeatherCon with WBAP. It'll be from 9:30 a.m. until 1:30 p.m. Frontiers of Flight Museum, Saturday, April 26th. If you don't know where the Frontiers of Flight Museum is, ask your phone. All right, that's going to do it for the James Show today. Stick around. Mark Levin's coming up next. I'm James Parker. It's News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. Focus, people, focus. This is Anita in Cleburne. You're on WBAP. What do you think about food stamps being used on junk food?
Well, I was listening to this, and I remember back when I was a kid, it wasn't called SNAP or, food stamps. It was called welfare. And my mom was a single mom with 4 kids, and she got on it for about 6 months. And she was very ashamed, but it was a way to feed us. And you had to go to like those army buildings, those big old metal buildings, and you would go in there and there'd be aisles, and you would go down those aisles and you get a 10-pound bag of flour, 10-pound bag of sugar, a 10-pound bag of potatoes, and that's all you got was staples, which of course we didn't have microwaves back then. You cooked everything from scratch. So
I like how so many people are turning back to how it used to be, because this is for a program I don't think should exist. Period. Even if it is in the more Spartan foundings that you experienced, But I think a lot of people's problem with this is that we're now subsidizing luxuries.
Right. And back then you didn't, though. And like I said, she got a job, and you were only supposed to be on it for so long, get you on your feet, get a job. And that's what she did. But these days, you're right. It's like a luxury, and you brag about it.
Well, would you be on my team here, Anita, if I just wanted to get rid of food stamps altogether? Like no government subsidies of poor people's food, period. We just go back to private voluntary donations like we did for all of American history up until the 60s?
Sure.
Okay, good. Yeah. That's kind of what I'm hoping people lead with, but people are leading with they don't like the luxurious part. Like you have a soft spot in your heart. Like philosophically, I guess I'm against it, but I can tolerate it if they're buying apples or something healthy. Karen in the GBC, for you non-East Texans, that's Gun Barrel City. What do you think about food stamps for junk food, Karen?
I think it's absolutely ridiculous. We have the opportunity to cook cookies or cakes for our children. We don't need to be able to purchase them ready-made.
That's interesting. Even if we get rid of the junk food part, could you still go out and buy flour and sugar and eggs and milk, and you could make your own cookies? That's kind of a killer argument. Like even if you think they should have cookies, how about you just make your own? How about you buy like the proto ingredients and like save the taxpayers some sort of just put in an ounce of work. Just do something to earn your cookies. Just cook them.
Exactly.
That's hilarious.
I raised 8 children, and my children drank Kool-Aid, and my children got baked items. But we don't need food stamps at all. I never got food stamps with 8 children. I was never qualified or never even applied, actually. But we don't need food stamps. We have so many food pantries for those that are truly in need.
Well,
we don't need food stamps.
Well, let me talk to Are you a Christian? Let's talk to the Christians for a second, because the reason we got our foothold into the rest of European society when we came up from the Middle East, they stopped persecuting us because they questioned the idea, why are we persecuting the Christians? All they do is feed poor people and take care of sick people. I mean, they're not bad. Of all the problems that we have here in the Byzantine Empire, the Roman Empire, whichever one, the Christians are not a problem. Why? Because we were known for feeding the hungry and taking care of the sick. Well, the government has come and jettison that from the Christian sphere, from the private voluntary donation sphere, whether it's religiously based or not. And now they get the credit. Now government feeds the poor people, and government provides healing and care to the poor people with Medicaid and Medicare. And so if you're wondering why so many people aren't too big of fans of Christianity, it's because their experience hasn't been the same of every other generation up until the 60s, where, there are some Christian hypocrites out there, some bigots or people who like to burn witches or misuse the scripture to oppress other people. But overall, if you look around, what's all the hospitals? Presbyterian hospital, Baptist hospital, there's a Methodist hospital, there's a Lutheran hospital, there's a Scottish Rite hospital, which isn't really religiously based, but still private voluntary donations of charity. And so we've taken away, we have offloaded the responsibility that used to be on us as Christians onto the government. And no wonder people don't think so great of us now, because now we don't have to put in the work. And if we are going to get rid of all these programs, remember, Christians, that's going to come with a lot more work for us. We're going to have to step up our donations. We're going to have to give a little bit more time. We're probably going to have to volunteer in some capacity when it comes to poor people and feeding people and healing people. A lot of that's we're going to be falling back on us. And I hope we're ready not just to run our mouth, but also accept the responsibility that's going to fall to us if we can ever get the dream of getting rid of these programs.